Hi, and welcome to Vices and Virtues, a series of animal stories for adults. I'm your storyteller, Eddy. Vices and Virtues is a collection of fictional short stories written and read by me and can be listened to in any order. To find the other stories in this collection, please go to matteddystories.com. There you'll find new stories, podcasts, and upcoming events. Today's story is about a rabbit who realizes his dream before he is ready. Please enjoy The Rabbit. Rabbit sat to eat breakfast at his dining table, opposite a portrait of his father. He stared glumly at Rabbit Sr., who had passed away a year ago and left Rabbit as the sole heir to his tunneling business. Under Rabbit's leadership, the business had gone from a highly profitable enterprise to Rabbit needing to meet with his bank manager to save the business from bankruptcy. "Do you want more coffee?" Rabbit's wife asked as she smoothed her crumpled t-shirt with their college alma mater emblazoned in bold serif font. "No," replied Rabbit, "no thank you." Rabbit wanted to be back at college. His father had been so proud of him for being only the second rabbit in the family after him to get a degree. Rabbit Sr. was remembered at his funeral as a trailblazer in a family of carrot farmers. He graduated from Harvard and started tunneling straight out of business school with his bare paws. Once Rabbit graduated, he feared having to get a job and stayed at school to complete a master's program. "Hey," said Rabbit's wife, as she pulled out the seat beside him. She reached across the table to straighten the lapel on Rabbit's suit and pull his tie flush against his top button. "You're a great husband and a great dad," she continued. "I said Rabbit, his whiskers twitching. "Maybe we shouldn't have bought this house when Dad died." Rabbit's wife pulled her ears back into a ponytail and poured him a coffee anyway. "We'd always dreamed of having a big family and a big house," said Rabbit's wife. "I need you to be strong today. You'll do great." Since college, they had talked about him running a business and living in a house with a long driveway and a swimming pool. Rabbit's wife had always believed in him more than he had. When they'd have drinks at a college bar, she'd look at Rabbit doughy-eyed and picture him standing at the head of a boardroom. When she told him, Rabbit laughed, but she would never giggle. Contrary to what his wife thought, Rabbit didn't think he'd do great with the bank manager. He didn't enjoy standing up to anyone. When the union asked him to improve employee benefits, he'd agreed. Whenever a long-serving staff member asked for a pay rise, he acceded to their request and allowed them to clock ungodly overtime hours. With money running low, Rabbit acquiesced when Weasel, the head of finance, recommended they skip a bank repayment in order to make payroll next week. In return, the bank froze the business's accounts. Now it was up to the bank manager to decide whether to unfreeze them or put the company into administration. On his way to the bank, Rabbit scratched around in the Range Rover's glove box until he found a pack of cigarettes. He promptly lit one, inhaling the smoke through his two front teeth. Just as Rabbit had begun to relax, his phone rang. "Rabbit!" It was unmistakably the screechy voice of Mole, the business's chief engineer, who had been his father's closest confidant. "Yeah," Rabbit replied. "More bad news, I'm afraid," said Mole. "One of our sites failed a safety certification today. The tunnel wasn't up to code." Rabbit was going to ask which site, but he already knew. At the board meeting months earlier, one of the executives had suggested that the business save money using substandard construction materials. It was Rabbit's decision, but instead he put it to a vote, and the other executives outvoted Rabbit and Mole. "I'm late," replied Rabbit, "for a very important date. I'll meet you at the office in an hour." "Sure," said Mole, "but we need to do something, Rabbit. Even I could see how poorly that site was built." "Is there any good news?" Rabbit asked. Mole didn't reply. As Rabbit approached a red light, he reached down to grab his phone. Mole had hung up. The wallpaper on Rabbit's phone was a photo of him and his wife at their wedding, with his parents standing on either side. It was the only time Rabbit had seen a tear in his father's eye. It was a rare moment of tenderness for the stoic Rabbit Sr. His father was incredibly sick by then. The cancer was scattered throughout his body like buckshot. It must have been incredibly tough to know he'd never meet his grandbunnies or see his son become a dad. After the wedding, Rabbit Sr. became more sentimental as he taught his son about the business. Feeling the heat of the cigarette on his whiskers, Rabbit squeezed the butt through the slit of a half-drunk cup of coffee in the center console. He'd only started smoking a few months ago after he'd hired Weasel, who always wore a pinstripe suit to accentuate his long body and smoked incessantly. He was meant to help Rabbit make difficult decisions, but was more interested in accounting trickery and cunning ways of balancing the books. Outside the bank, Rabbit lit another cigarette and pressed his button nose against the bank's window frontage. A menagerie of animals were doing their personal banking as tellers opened and shut their tills. Ever since he was a little bunny, he would come to the bank with his father. He could still smell his father's cologne wafting off him as he strode into the bank to shake hands with Warthog, the bank manager. Warthog would slap his father on the back and offer him a macchiato. Rabbit would sit quietly, nibbling on a celery stick, swinging his feet under his chair. Rabbit pushed back from the window and took a final drag on his cigarette before going through the door. A chipmunk in a bank uniform stepped forward to greet Rabbit. "Welcome, sir. It's a beautiful day to learn about our low-interest credit cards." "Where's the bank manager?" Rabbit asked. "Warthog knows I'm coming." He looked around the tiled room with an old-fashioned vault at the back. "May I inquire why you need to see the bank manager, sir?" Rabbit raised his voice. "If you must know, the bank has cut off my money, and I need the money to run my business and pay the mortgage I have with this bank. I have mouths to feed, and last week my wife took our older litter to the orthodontist where some beaver suggested they all need braces." "Cute," said the chipmunk, tilting her head slightly. "You've got little bunnies?" Rabbit began tapping his foot in frustration. "Where's Warthog?" The chipmunk escorted Rabbit to a mahogany desk near the vault and asked him to wait. Rabbit sat and reflected on how this meeting with the bank manager would define him. At the funeral, the eulogy he had read for his father described him in seemingly contradictory terms. He was both generous and discerning. He was warm and disarmingly honest. He was empathetic and resolute. The yin and yang that his father lived had served the business and their family well. Rabbit searched within himself for the tougher aspects of his father's attributes when he heard grunting from behind him. Warthog was speaking with Chipmunk. Warthog flicked his head from Rabbit to the chipmunk, revealing the pointy, swollen warts on either side of his face. Were they talking about the state of his business? The scene he had caused when entering the bank? Rabbit stewed on what Warthog and the chipmunk were discussing. Warthog placed his hooves behind his back and made his way toward Rabbit. Warthog wore a grey suit with a double-breasted jacket that concealed his round belly. His bristly hair was combed neatly behind his ears, and his tusks were polished to a shimmering white. "Rabbit," said Warthog, "how are those darling 8 kits of yours?" "8," Rabbit replied. "Try 17 little ones bounding around your house and chewing on everything." Warthog chuckled and continued around the desk. He adjusted his pleated trousers before easing himself into a black leather chair. Rabbit sat, fortifying himself for what was to come, but he felt more like the cushioning beneath Warthog that wheezed under his weight. "I'm sure you know why I'm here," Rabbit began. Warthog let out an approving snort. "Your bank has frozen my money," said Rabbit. "Weasel, my head of finance, told me, so here I am." Warthog sat back in his chair and pulled at the end of his tusk as though he were twirling a moustache. "I see," said Warthog. "You do know why your money has been frozen, don't you?" Rabbit knew better than anyone. He knew the projects were not profitable and the business wasn't winning as many contracts as it used to. He knew about the increase in staffing costs and sketchy accounting practices. Rabbit knew the buck stopped with him. He'd overseen the decline of the business. The money was frozen because of him. Hoping to project an air of confidence, Rabbit rose from his chair as he spoke. "Warthog, business owners like us are the lifeblood of this community. We represent what this country was founded on: entrepreneurs, pioneers, captains of industry." A coin fell to the floor somewhere in the bank. Warthog leaned forward, his belly pressed into the desk. Rabbit's ears stood tall. He pushed on. "This is an opportunity for 2 business owners to work out a win-win solution, and for you to support a fellow business owner. In fact, you should run for office one day. This is exactly the type of story that would serve you well on the campaign trail." Warthog stared at Rabbit, seemingly unmoved by his plea. "Well," said Rabbit, lowering his voice, "please, you know my family. I'm not asking. I'm telling you. I need the money." Rabbit slumped into his chair. Warthog reached into his jacket and produced a handkerchief to blow his snout. "Rabbit," said Warthog, "I worked with your father for many years. He never missed a loan repayment, and I don't know what's happened to the business over the past year, but I know it isn't good. Are you sure you can handle running it?" The business was Rabbit's connection to his father. It symbolized ideals and principles that were a family heirloom Rabbit hoped he could pass on to his kits one day. Rabbit needed to save the business to be the type of son and father his wife saw him to be. There was no way he'd let the bank take what his father had built. "Of course I can!" Rabbit yelled as he thumped his foot on the floor. His large, flat foot thwacked loudly against the tiles. Warthog sat stony. Rabbit had never spoken like that before. He was exhausted. He knew there was a better way to run the business, but was scared Warthog wouldn't give him the chance. Rabbit held his head high, despite his increasing sense of helplessness. "Your father would never have put me in this position," said Warthog as he waved his hoof toward the entranceway. Feeling defeat was near, Rabbit curled himself up in his chair and closed his eyes, expecting security to descend on him and drag him out the door. He heard steps coming closer and closer until he felt an animal recede past him to Warthog. Rabbit raised his head. "This is Chipmunk," Warthog stated solemnly. "You need to work with her to straighten out the business." "I don't understand," replied Rabbit. "Chipmunk is a forensic accountant," said Warthog. "I will unfreeze your accounts on the condition that Chipmunk conducts a full audit and finds the business is solvent." Warthog planted his hooves on the desk between him and Rabbit. "If we find anything irregular, or if Chipmunk thinks you're in over your head, the bank will have no choice but to seize your business." Chipmunk pulled a piece of paper and a pen from her blazer's outer pocket and began scribbling notes as she spoke. "I'd like to review your assets against your liabilities and come up with an understanding of your working capital. Of course, I'll need to access to your cash position and cash equivalents." Rabbit couldn't accept the offer. There was no way the bank would allow him to keep the business if they knew the full state of affairs. He could turn things around. He just needed to fix this immediate problem. Rabbit settled himself back into his seat. "The property market has been strong this year, right?" said Rabbit. "What about it?" huffed Warthog. "I appreciate your offer to work with Chipmunk," said Rabbit, "but with property prices going up, I must have some equity in my house." Even though Rabbit had only been making the minimum repayments, he knew the house had increased significantly in value. Warthog sighed. "You're putting your family at risk here, Rabbit. You're right. I could let you take out the increase in property value, but I don't feel great about it. What makes you think you can fix this mess?" Rabbit thought of his father and how he'd consistently bet on himself. He'd raised many a litter, put food on the table for dozens of kits, and managed to keep a roof over their heads. He just had to run the business like his father had. Rabbit sat taller as he spoke. "Because I'm Rabbit Senior's son. I can run the business just like him." Warthog rested his hooves on his belly. "Very well. I'll have the evaluations team calculate the number and I'll release the funds today," said Warthog. "And Rabbit, I hope you're right." Rabbit raced to his car and grabbed the remaining cigarettes from the glove box, walked to a public trash can, and tossed them. When Rabbit arrived at the company office, Mole was waiting for him in his khaki overalls outside the front entranceway. Weasel was chatting with him as he smoked a cigarette. "So?" asked Weasel. "I need you to pack up your office and leave," replied Rabbit. "You're no longer required." "But the bank," said Weasel. "You need me. What happened?" "I don't need you," Rabbit replied. "I'd like to speak with Mole." Rabbit raised his eyebrows and cleared his throat. Weasel took the hint and slinked into the building. "Mole," said Rabbit, "you worked alongside my father for many years. Teach me how he ran this place." Mole removed his glasses and rubbed his black, beady eyes. "I'll promote you," continued Rabbit. "You can have any office you want. You can name your salary, whatever title you please." Mole rested his glasses back on the tip of his pointy pink nose. "I don't care about that stuff. You know that," replied Mole. "Help me run this place like my father did," said Rabbit. "I need your help to return to how things were. I want to build tunnels we can be proud of." Mole shuffled uneasily in his black work boots. "All right," said Mole. "But if you want to run this business the way your father would, then you have to stop using shoddy materials. and you can't give in to unreasonable employee demands. Your father made the tough decisions when they needed to be made." Rabbit nodded. Mole was right. It would be difficult, but with Mole as his only advisor, he already felt more confident. The two of them, working together, would move the company in the right direction. "Yeah," said Mole, allowing himself a smile. "Let's make this something we can be proud of, and that your father would be proud of." Mole patted Rabbit on the back. "And that my wife would be proud of," Rabbit thought, knowing he would have to tell her about the larger mortgage on their home. It was the right choice. He thought of his offspring, who would someday inherit the business. He checked his phone and was again greeted by the picture from his wedding. The tear in his father's eye now felt like his father had seen Rabbit's unrealized potential. He knew his son would grow up to be just like him. The Rabbit was edited by Sylvia Schwartz and Todd Green. You can find the Vices and Virtues collection on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Please ensure to rate, review, and subscribe. To join the mailing list and receive updates on similar stories, please go to matteddystories.com. You can also follow me on Instagram @matteddystories. For literary agent inquiries, speaking engagement requests, or publicity inquiries, please email admin@matteddystories.com. This story was dedicated to Michael and brought to you by Hudson Valley Podcasting. Special thanks to Sarah Crow for donating today's props.